Another month has come to an end here in our Royals franchise, so it's time for another edition of the monthly recap. July 2021 has come to an end, but before we head into August of 2021, we must go over July in the monthly recap. So, our Royals are sitting at 60-49, currently sitting at first place in the American League Central. Behind them, 3 games back, are the Cleveland Indians, and then only 3.5 games back are the Chicago White Sox. So it's still a pretty tight division race, and it's definitely not a given that we're going to make the playoffs. As far as the All-Stars go, you'll see the rosters just scrolling by on your screen right now. Our only All-Star was Kelvin Herrera, our closer, because Jorge Bonifacio got absolutely snubbed when it came to the All-Star rosters. And since it is the July recap, the big things to go over are the trades, because the trade deadline is obviously at the very end of July, and we made 2 pretty decently sized trades. The first one was Brandon Crawford. We acquired Brandon Crawford from the San Francisco Giants in return for third baseman slash first baseman slash left fielder Hunter Dozier and shortstop Chris Owings. Owings is pretty much just a swap of shortstops, and I needed to even out the money, and Owings' money helped with that. And then San Francisco, they need a third baseman since they have an aging Longoria who just hasn't been good for them at all. And Dozier still has a few years of team control. His A potential increases the trade value, so you'll probably look at the trade screen and be like, wow, you could have squeezed in like 4 more guys in that trade with Dozier's trade value. But I wasn't going to take advantage of that because the game gave him an A potential for absolutely no reason, considering he doesn't deserve an A potential at all. So I wasn't about to completely screw over the CPU with that A potential trade value. If you want to see that, there's plenty of other people in the sports community who will post plenty of videos just like that. And as far as Brandon Crawford goes, he is purely a rental. He is on the last year of his contract. He will not be brought back at the end of this season. We needed a shortstop, and as far as I'm concerned, he was pretty much a very obvious choice for us to pick up at shortstop to help us out for the rest of the season and our playoff push and then World Series push in the playoffs. The other trade we made was we picked up Matt Duffy from the San Diego Padres in return for starting pitching prospect Scott Blewett and then infielder Greg Garcia. Duffy has 2 years left on his contract, the rest of this year plus all of next year. He could possibly be a third baseman for us next year or a second baseman for us next year because both of those positions are going to be opened up in the next season, and then we don't really know who's going to play either of those positions for us. So Duffy has the potential to play both of those, and I would be completely fine of having him at either of those. He's also having a career of the year this year, and we needed another bat in our lineup, especially since a few of our main ones are struggling, with Vince Falvey being down in AAA because he's been so bad, and then Pavin Smith, who probably would be down in AAA if we had another option at first base that I was comfortable having there at the Major League level. Scott Blewett is definitely the main piece in the trade. Duffy doesn't have the highest trade value, but he is having a great year, and we have such an abundance of young pitching that I had no problem giving them a pretty good starting pitching prospect. And then Greg Garcia was to give them a guy to replace Duffy in their roster, and then also to make the money work, because we couldn't just give them a prospect because Duffy is making a decent amount of money, and we were not able to just give them a prospect and then keep Garcia. And plus, we don't have room for Garcia anyways. They can use him, we won't be. And now moving on to the stats on the rest of our players, we have Lear Hernandez, who was called up in the month of July, and in his very small sample size so far in the major leagues, he's been very good. He has a 1,193 OPS with 4 home runs, but it is a very small sample size and only 24 at bat, so we'll see how he's looking towards the end of August when we have to make the decision on who will be on our playoff roster as our DH or 4th outfielder or whatever Lear Hernandez ends up being. Jorge Bonifacio, he's still doing his thing. He's still our best player. 880 OPS, 19 home runs. Jorge Soler, his power bat's still there, leading the team with 24 home runs. His power bat has been absolutely surging this year. I believe his power versus right-handed stats is going up like +12 this year. It's pretty ridiculous. Matt Carpenter, he's also still doing his thing, 800 OPS, even 14 home runs. He's getting on base, he's hitting with some pop, he's doing his thing at the top of the order against right-handed pitching. Brett Phillips had a very hot streak in July. His OPS is up to a 7.71 now. He's got 7 home runs on the year. He's also the leader in the Gold Glove center field race, so he's been doing things on the offensive side in the month of July and then also on the defensive side of the ball all year long. Khalil Lee has been very good for us as our 4th outfielder, a 7.68 OPS with 7 home runs and 191 at-bats. He's basically doing his best to impress to take over as the right fielder next year when Soler leaves, and he is an option to be a right fielder for us this year because if we still don't have a DH set at the end of August, like if Hernandez can't get the job done, if he's not set in that spot, then Khalil Lee will probably take over as the right fielder, Soler will shift the DH, and then someone like Anthony Jimenez, who's pretty good in the field, will take over as the 4th outfielder. Pavin Smith is a guy who has not been good at all, and like I mentioned earlier in the episode, he is one of the guys who you want to have hitting on our team. He's our first baseman. He is on paper one of the top 3 bats on this team, but he just hasn't been that this year. I haven't lost faith in him, but 2021 is definitely a down year for him, and this would be a perfect opportunity for someone like Ryan O'Hearn to take over at first base, because he's been in the minor leagues for us, pretty much always raking it every single year of this franchise. But he has a dislocated ankle, and he's been out for pretty much the whole year. He dislocated his ankle very early on. He was hitting well in the AAA before he dislocated it, but we just don't have that option anymore, so disappointing to see. And we'll either just have to hope that Pavin Smith can have a better August and September, or we'll have to look otherwhere in the organization to see if we have a first baseman who can take over at that position. And speaking of injuries, Sean Gilmartin only has 3 to 4 weeks left on his fractured wrist. He will be back for the playoffs, and that's definitely good to see, as he was definitely probably besides Herrera, our best reliever on our team this year. Orlando Meadows has been pretty good at the major league level since coming up. He has 20 innings pitched, 28 strikeouts, a 2.15 FIP. He's earned his spot at the major league level. Michael Winikka, not so much. He's been roughed up pretty good. He has 30 2/3 innings pitched, and he has a 5.58 ERA with a 5.9 FIP. Not very good for Michael Winikka. He's going to be the guy who gets sent down for Gilmartin when he returns, and Meadows will probably be on the playoff roster as a reliever for us. And that's pretty much going to wrap things up here for this edition of the monthly recap of July. We are going to be heading into August 2021. And with that being said, that's going to wrap things up here for this edition of Kansas City Royals Baseball. I've been your host, Jerseyborn, and I'm saying goodbye.